What do these 7 manga have in common? Their illustrators were all brought in to be illustrators for different chapters of a single video game. That game was Live Alive. Live Alive was developed and published by Square and released for the Super Famicom on September 2nd, 1994 in Japan. It was later re-released for the Wii U's Virtual Console on June 17th, 2015, and the next year was ported for the 3DS's Virtual Console on November 28th, 2016. This version of the game has never been officially released outside of Japan. The Live Alive HD 2D remake, which shares its title with the original, was developed by Square Enix and Historia and published by Square Enix for the Nintendo Switch and released on July 22nd, 2022. The next year, it was released digitally for PS4, PS5, and Steam on April 27th, 2023. After selecting New Game, you are brought to a chapter select where there are 7 different scenarios to choose from, each with a different protagonist: a caveman, a martial arts master, a ninja, an outlaw, gunslinger, the world's strongest fighter, an esper, and a spherical robot. Each chapter has a unique story to tell, and each one reflects popular stories in their respective genres. Chapters are short enough for most people to finish in a single session of play. All chapters begin with an intro cutscene and a prompt you to name your character. Each chapter strikes a different balance between story and combat and has a unique mechanic, such as gaining new techniques by watching your opponents perform them, stealth to evade combat encounters, finding things through scent, reading NPCs' minds, or recruiting townsfolk to set up traps. Through classic RPG mechanics, you level up your character through battling to increase their stats and gain new abilities. You get equipment from finding secrets, completing side quests, and random drops from enemies. After completing a chapter, the chapter select screen returns with the chapter marked as completed. There are 2 constants through each chapter. First, a man named Watanabe suffers a terrible tragedy while his son watches. Second, a final fight against a being that's name is derived from odio, the Latin word for hate. Putting all the chapters on the same save file will unlock the final chapter. During the final chapter, you travel the map, recruiting all the protagonists from the previous chapters to help you take on odio. Live Alive's development started in 1993 as Takashi Tokita's directorial debut. Tokita had worked at Square for several years in various roles. His largest role was scenario writer for Final Fantasy IV and Hanjuku Hero, Asakayo Hanjuku Nare. In interviews, Tokita has talked about how he wanted to do things differently from most of the other RPGs that Square had released up to that point. Taking inspiration from the story structure from Dragon Quest IV, starting the game with several chapters of meeting all the heroes, then assembling them in the final chapter. Tokita also wanted to include more strategy game elements so that battles take place on a 7x7 grid, but do not use the active time battle ATB system that the Final Fantasy series was known for. In addition, 7 manga illustrators were brought in to do character design for the first 7 chapters of the game. All these things together make Live Alive stand out from the other RPGs of its time, and even stand out now. Now you may be asking, how can a game have 7 different lead illustrators all doing their own unique styles and still feel cohesive? There are 3 reasons why I feel having these different styles together works. First, each illustration is converted into a 16x16 locomotive sprite and a 32x32 pixel battle sprite. Color and size limitations that are due to the hardware limitations of the Super Famicom help blend the styles, but also leaves each style feeling unique. Second, each style exists in its own chapter. Third, the final chapter of the game becomes an ensemble game. If Mario, Snake, Bayonetta, and Pac-Man can feel like they belong in a single game, so can the cast of Live Alive. As a kid growing up, my siblings and I got maybe 1 to 2 new games each year, one for our birthday and another for Christmas. My parents would occasionally rent us games over the weekend. Renting the games was always a gamble if the game we wanted would be there, or if there were any good games at all to rent. Sometimes we weren't able to finish a game and had to hope that our save file on the game itself would be there the next time we went to the rental store. Another practice that we had was to borrow games from our neighbors. This always had mixed results. It sometimes would work out fine, but other times friends would say that they don't remember borrowing the game, that their brother traded the game with their friends, or they claimed the game was always theirs. When it did work, there was a large neighborhood collection that let the neighborhood kids experience all types of games. Relatives were also another common source of new games for me, be it them giving us games or playing games with my cousins. I remember seeing my cousins had Goof Troop for the SNES and thinking that their parents had bought them a stinker. I had played Lion King and some other disappointing Disney games, so I assumed Goof Troop would be the same. After watching my cousins play Goof Troop, I was blown away. I don't think I saw the credits roll until many years later, but I knew that Goof Troop was a good game. I learned a lesson that I would forget and relearn many times. Impressions left from past experiences can lead to incorrect assumptions. I'd forgotten the good Disney games that I had played and even owned, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers and The Little Mermaid for the NES. This wasn't the first time I had a similar experience with these same cousins. One Christmas, they had given us F-Zero for the SNES. After looking at the box art, my dad, brother, and I decided we'd rather play something else and we were going to return it and get a different game. My little brother, however, thought F-Zero looked cool and opened it up, played it, and hated it. Those of us that wanted to return F-Zero loved it. My cousins, their parents, or maybe the employee who recommended the game had similar taste to mine, and I began to see great value of getting good recommendations. After we got a 56K modem for our computer, I was introduced to a bunch of new games online. One of the sites I frequented a lot was the Cult of Kefka. It had brief reviews for games. Live Alive was a game that stuck out to me because I saw various people recommend it. A bunch of different Squaresoft games were among my favorite games: Final Fantasy IX, Super Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Brave Fencer Musashi, so I felt it was a safe bet. One thing I didn't realize though is that it had been a decade since its release, and my modern expectations for it would cause me grief. After loading up Live Alive, I chose the Cowboy. I was under the impression that it was a character select for a single story, not different chapters, something similar to that of the Wild Arms series. I went through the first intro scene and then died in the first fight. Looking back, this is something very hard to do. Sundown has a counterattack that triggers off of most of Mad Dog's attacks. I wanted to try again. I chose the Caveman. I watched the next intro and wandered around until I got to go hunting. The game tried to teach me how to sniff. I just went around getting into encounters until the old man let me back in. I went back in and wandered around until Pogo went to sleep. After waking up during the night, I wandered around until I found Beru hiding in the haystack. I played hide and seek with Beru until he wouldn't let me find her. I knew where she was. I followed her as she popped up through the haystacks, but no matter how many times I pressed A, she wouldn't come out. I couldn't figure out what to do and quit. For the next couple of decades, I saw Live Alive brought up a few times. One of my friends asked everyone to stream Live Alive if they were to play it for the first time. I was never really interested in revisiting Live Alive until the announcement of the HD 2D remake during the Nintendo Direct. I really liked the look and feel of Octopath Traveler and felt this would be a good chance for me to try the game again, since it would be in the same style. Because of my previous experience with the game, I didn't want to outright buy it, so I ended up renting it. Twilight of Edo Japan seemed like a good first chapter. Sneaking was never my forte, but I like to try to do it in games. I kept getting caught and falling into traps. That caused me to kill a few guys in the way. After reaching the objective that was marked on the map, I encountered the first boss, which I was severely underleveled for, and retried the fight several times. Get up on the fight, I started the chapter over and made sure to level up enough before I went back. Overall, it took me 5 to 6 hours and I quit for the day after I finished. The next few days I progressed through the other chapters pretty easily. I even figured out how to get Beru out of her haystack. Overall, I had an okay time, but I was getting frustrated having to grind levels in some of the chapters. As I selected each chapter, I wondered how many levels I'm gonna have to grind this time. I was excited to see the final chapter become available. It was the whole reason I wanted to try the game again. After running around trying to recruit characters, I became disappointed with the lack of any real story going on. There were small encounters with each of the characters, but it wasn't the story I was hoping for. It reminded me of what I disliked from Octopath Traveler. You have a bunch of characters, but they don't really play any part in each other's stories. So I dropped Live Alive and returned it the same day. Looking back, the reason I dropped Live Alive was because it didn't meet my expectations, most of which were unrealistic. This has been a common problem I've had with several games, like with a particular blue robot. For this review, I want to play both the remake and the original Famicom release. Because I'm not fluent in Japanese and using online translation seemed like an awful idea, I decided to use the Aeon Genesis translation. And translations are interesting to me. The groups that work on them don't get paid, have no one to report to, and they do it out of love. Fan translations each have a different feel and especially feel different from most official translations. The Aeon Genesis translation made Live Alive become accessible to more people and help create new fans. These fans helped make the remake become a reality. When the Live Alive remake came out, there were and still are complaints about the official English translation. There were changes to some risque and iffy choices in dialogue and item names. These same changes most likely would have happened if the Super Famicom version was officially released in the US, especially if it was back in the 90s. I understand both sides and have realized one thing: no translation nor localization can be perfect. There are always compromises. I'm grateful to all the fan translations of media I've enjoyed over the years and experiences they provided for me. Nostalgia is an interesting thing. It leaves feelings of longing, lessens severity of faults, and it enhances experiences. There are games that I'll always have particular fondness for because they were one of the few games that I had growing up. Spelunker is a game that is special to me. Despite all the retro jank, the awkwardness of the controls, dying from falling from 2 feet, and other really easy ways to die. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie featuring Ivan Ooze, I thought was a top tier game for the longest time. Until I had some friends play the game and they voiced their distaste for certain aspects of the game. At first I couldn't believe it and defended it. After some time I came to realize that I was just used to it, and in fact it was some retro jank. The long wind-ups for any attack, unable to move while performing an attack, and morphing early is just bad. Super Mario RPG will always hold a special place in my heart due to the nostalgia I have for it. I played through it so many times growing up, I'll never forget working with my cousins trying to figure out how to beat Boshi in a race on Yoster Isle. An important part of any remake or remaster is to decide how much of the original game is going to remain unchanged. Is it going to still have that retro feel, just pouring it to a new system with updated graphics, or do a complete overhaul? Getting that retro feel right has been a problem that indie game devs have been tackling for a long time. Making games feel nostalgic and like a game from the past is hard to do without making the game janky and using dated mechanics. Signalis does this very well, except it keeps the tradition of old survival horror games where you have a very small inventory. This has been remedied in a recent patch. Some items no longer take up inventory space, and there is now an option to increase the amount of inventory space or revert back to the old system, if you prefer that. Shovel Knight nails the retro feel without the retro jank. It plays like a modern game but feels like something from an age-long past. The Live Alive HD 2D remake keeps that retro feel, but with a modern UI. The problem that other games had with any UI is presenting as much information as possible within its hardware limitations. Items in Breath of Fire can only have 7 characters in their name. If items are stackable, i.e. Marble 3x6, they have to use 2 of their precious 7 characters to indicate the amount. Equipment can have implied additional effects. Usually the names of the items try to indicate what those effects are. Dream RG or Dream Ring from Breath of Fire at first glance has no benefit, but prevents the paralysis status. With Live Alive there are the Suijin Tabi. If you're unfamiliar with Suijin or what Tabi are, you have no idea that they granted healing from water tiles. The remake has a toggle to switch between the effects on your statuses and the additional effects, which make it so you don't have to rely on intuition for what each item does. You can see some of the additional effects of items in the original, but the equipment can't be currently equipped and you must select it in the item menu. Getting lost is a common occurrence in RPGs. You could miss event triggers which will cause the story not to proceed, or you may need to revisit someplace you've already been. The modern fix for this is quest tracking and quest markers to indicate where the next trigger is, be it a location you must reach or an item to collect or an NPC to talk to. The Live Alive remake added a radar that you can toggle off or on that tries to help point in the right direction. It doesn't always work perfectly, like when you need to feed Beru enough meat to fill her up, it will continue to be on her even if you don't have enough meat to give her. Showing HP, weaknesses, and resistances without a use of skill is a change made in the remake that not even more modern RPGs will do. Seeing an enemy health bar or having an indicator change from green to yellow to red are much more common than exact amounts of health. Cube does have an attack HP lookup, which does show you the enemy HP, like Scan from the Final Fantasy series. In addition to the health bars and HP, you can now also see the charge gauge fill up the closer it is to a unit's turn. During an interview, director Takashi Tokita talked about how he wanted to remake Live Alive several times, but it just never felt right. Tokita joined Team Asano after they released Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler inspired him to have discussions with the team to see if they'd be interested in remaking Live Alive in the same style as Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler doesn't just use the same style as the Live Alive remake, but has a similar story structure. 8 protagonists that each have their own story, and once all the stories are finished, they come together to defeat a greater evil. One thing I like in Live Alive that Octopath doesn't have is that most of the protagonists have their own party. Boga has his trusty sidekick Gori and his Krasberu. Sundown has Mad Dog, and the Shifu has his disciples. All the party interacts with the plot in each chapter, and the rest of the party doesn't just appear awkwardly after each story scene. One of my favorite parts of video games is the story, and some of the best stories are told through gameplay. Dragon Quest II starts with Moonbrook being attacked by minions of Hargan. I was tasked with finding others that share my blind of Erdrick, and together we destroy Hargan and his minions. I was told that the Prince of Kanek is a descendant of Erdrick, and that I should be able to find him in Kanek. After fighting my way to Kanek, I was told that the prince had gone to the Spring of Bravery to the east. I went to the east, fought through the monsters to the spring to only be told that the prince had gone back to my home. I made my way back home and spoke to the king, and he told me that the prince had already left. Not sure where to go, I headed west and decided to rest at the inn and left with him. And sitting out inside the inn was a new character. I walked up and spoke to him. He introduced himself as Prince Rolando and said, "I've been searching for you," and I responded, "No, I've been searching for you." During an interview, director Takashi Tokita talks about his experience playing Dragon Quest II and how he had a similar reaction with this event. That meeting with Prince Rolando was the moment he decided he wanted to make RPGs as his main line of work. Video games have the ability to make you feel like you're the one doing the actions before you think of it being the character doing the actions. I thought of it as me searching for Rolando, not the hero. Music is another part of storytelling in video games that can help you become emotionally invested in the story or characters. Music helps magnify emotional beats of stories. Early on in Breath of Fire 3, the home of Ryu, the protagonist, and his found family are attacked. You barely survive the attack. You assume that Rei and Tipo are both dead. Later in the story, you hear of a wild tiger that has been targeting and terrorizing a shady group. After being attacked by this tiger, you hear rumors of it being in the forest. In the forest, you follow its growls to your old home. As you turn the corner, the growling stops and you see Rei. Four Old Friends begins to play as Rei recognizes Ryu. Rei explains how he found those who had destroyed your home and killed Tipo and you. How he has been attacking the group to avenge Tipo and you, and despite you being alive, he still needs to avenge Tipo and teach them a lesson. I remember seeing this play out the first time and being so excited for Rei to be alive and have him join me. But when the sad music started playing, I got worried that I was gonna have to kill him. Now whenever I hear Four Old Friends, I get a swell of emotions. Games use battle, location, and character themes to help elicit certain emotional reactions. Persona 5's Life Will Change builds up the hype for your heist and plays over the battle theme so the hype is never interrupted. Chrono Cross's Another Arnie Village plays after coming back from the strange end to your date with Lena. The village at first glance seems normal, but the new theme playing clues you into something has changed. Characters' themes are some of my favorite music. Whenever I hear them, they remind me of my adventures with the characters. Yoko Shimomura, the composer for Live Alive, has shared the following story about her experience with Heavenly Flight from Dragon Quest III. I'd just been hired as a game composer for the first time, but there was a bit of a gap before I would properly join the company and start work. That's when I heard Heavenly Flight. I was so impacted by it, I started worrying, could someone like me even make something like this? Am I even going to be able to do my job properly? It was the most beautiful song I had ever heard. I remember thinking, I'd give my life to write a song this good. The fact that somebody could write such a melody is humbling, envious, frustrating. I had such a mix of emotions from how I admired it. I was essentially in a state of shock. In the game, Heavenly Flight plays the moment Ramia takes flight, and if you hold down the directional pad, Ramia keeps flying on and on. I watched Ramia fly forever like that, just doing nothing. The map, the time, just kept flying by as Heavenly Flight played over and over. I was frozen, unable to do anything. The song was just too good. It was honestly a shock, that's all I could say, a shock. I really think the melody is just so beautiful. I can confidently say that Shimomura was able to make music like Heavenly Flight. The music she composed for Super Mario RPG and her other games has left a large impression on me since I was a kid. Fight Against the Armed Boss, Beware the Mushroom Forest, The Starlight's Flower, all fill me with nostalgia and wonder. Live Alive soundtrack helps you slide into any of the settings and supports the many different story beats. Not all the tracks are equal, but they each play their part well. One that really stands out amongst the rest is Megalomania. You may recognize another famous song with a very similar name. Megalovania only shares two traits with Megalomania, its similar name and the significance of when it plays. Toby said the following while being interviewed with Yoko Shimomura. Obviously, Megalomania itself is really cool, but the secret sauce that makes it really stand out isn't just the composition, it's the context within which it's used in the game. Because it always played at the end of the chapter, the player starts to get an almost Pavlovian response to it. No matter whether you're in a prehistoric world, the future, or ancient China, as soon as the track plays, your brain fully activates. This is it. This is the end. Having the correct music play at the right time seems like a given. It doesn't always happen, but when a game builds up to a certain moment and the music hits, it just leaves you in shock. After I came up with the idea for Second Chance Game Review, I created a poll for my friends to vote on which game I should start playing with. All 4 games I have a mixed past with. but I was excited to play any of them again. I was hopeful that the mixed feelings would help others relate more and perhaps inspire them. Live Alive won the poll, so I decided to play through the remake first because I remembered how hard of a time I had with the Super Famicom version. I wanted to give Live Alive the best chance I could. I made sure to have a guide up in case I needed it, and I'm so glad that I played the remake first. Live Alive was spelled across the screen one letter at a time, separated by a short scene from different chapters of the game. As the title faded in, the camera panned down to a cliff overlooking a castle in a valley. I selected New Game, and 7 chapters faded into view. I chose Twilight of Edo Japan, wanting to love it unlike I was able to do the first time. The chapter begins with a brief introduction to an impatient Lord Ode-io, his minions, and their plans. At dawn, they will skin their newly captured prisoner and replace him with a puppet wearing his skin. Then Ode-io will use his puppet to spread war across Japan. In the next scene I watched as Oboromaru is given his mission to infiltrate Castle Ode and rescue the prisoner. Oboromaru is given the choice to traverse the halls as a silent shadow or paint them red with Ode blood. As Oboromaru makes his way to the castle, the narrator gives a brief explanation about Bakumatsu. The narrator explains it was a time when the feudal factions fought against the forces of modernity. This is the story of a shinobi, one whose work remains in the shadows and accomplishments unwritten. Since this was my first chapter of this playthrough, I got a tutorial explaining the new features added in the remake. A rater to help you find your objective and the ability to quit and return at any point in any chapter. And a tutorial of how to use a map. The map can be useful. The purple part is the area that Oboromaru is currently in, and the red circle marks the current objective. I decided before playing I wanted to do the 0 kill route and sneak past all the guards to avoid killing them. I've never been good at stealth in games, so I'm not sure why I decided this was a good idea. I used my most excellent stealth to sneak past the front 2 guards. I slipped past the next 2 guards just as gracefully as I did the first 2. Upon entering the first room, a cutscene played out where Lord Ode-io's retainers discussed the hourly password. One shouted mountain, the others responded with river, except for one that yelled potato. The others seized the odd man out and took him away. With a vague hint about the ringing of the bells, the retainers vacated the hall. I thought to myself of the 2 passwords I knew, river and origin. If that was enough of a hint, the game popped up a tutorial to explain that the password changes whenever the bell rings. Now many paths through the castle were open. I wandered around collecting some items, using Shadowed Self to avoid encounters and running from any accidental encounters. While exploring the attic, there are a few points to peep down to see some NPC conversation and hints. Also in the attic, I got my first Watanabe scene. Papa Rat and Little Rat were trying to bring honor to the Watanabe clan by stealing some money to share with their village. Papa Rat, however, made too much noise and gained the attention of a retainer who began to stab up into the ceiling. Papa Rat effortlessly dodged all the attacks until he began to boast and got stabbed. Sobbing Little Rat took Papa Rat out of sight. I continued my journey through the trap-filled castles, saving whenever I saw anything suspicious so I would only ever lose minimal progress. If I got into an encounter I couldn't run from, I tried to die as quickly as possible so I could reload. After going along the outer wall, I made my way through the secret passage to the waterway and past the prisoner's cells. I continued to collect some more items while exploring and running from all the encounters I got into. I made my way to each floor by way of the attics. Each attic has its own challenge gears that change direction via switches, floors that vanish and reappear based on a timer, little bots that knock you down a hole if you get too close, and some forced encounters. After reaching the 4th floor attic, I attempted to do one of the forced encounters. I couldn't skip them because I didn't have a rope and hook. I tried to make a path to the leader to end the encounter quickly, and the enemy countered my attack with an explosion that did 999 damage to me. For the next 20 minutes, I game overed and reloaded several times trying to beat the forced encounters. This really was my own fault since I reached this point being only level 1, and the guide did tell me to grind before this. But I wanted to beat the chapter quickly and thought grinding would be slower. I was then realizing how wrong I was. After making out of the attic, I reached the first fight with one of Ode-io's minions, Puppet Master Genai. Genai killed me in 2 hits and I did very little damage. I took the lesson to heart and went out to grind some levels. I couldn't find anyone that wouldn't count as a kill to grind some levels off of, so I came back to Genai and used the items that I had been collecting during the past hour and a half. After a few attempts, I was able to beat Genai. After moving on to the next room, I put some coins I had collected into a slot. The room shook and then I fell into a trap. I reloaded and put the coins back in and came into the room with the puppet that was mentioned during the intro. It turned into a recolored version of Oboromaru and attacked. After defeating it, it joined me and I fell into a trap and it broke. I reloaded and defeated it again, then realized I needed another coin to get the puppet out of there. I reloaded to an earlier save. I used the guide to find another coin and used that chance to grind some levels off of the ghost the guide had recommended earlier. Then I made my way back and got the puppet. I then went 5 rooms with the puppet to have a rat cause the puppet to malfunction and blow up 3 guards. This is required for the Zero Kill route because there's no other way past these guards. Just beyond the exploded guards was Oda Io and 8 of his retainers. I brazenly walked into the middle of the group. Oda Io gave the required villain monologue. As he finished, a voice called out, "Get down!" I ducked and a shot knocked the pistol out of Oda Io's hand. An unknown man entered the room and his threats caused the retainers to run away. With this development, Lord Oda Io ran away after summoning the ghost of Musashi, a legendary swordsman. Without too much effort and thanks to some ghost grinding, I was able to beat Musashi. After I chased after Oda Io, a woman surrounded by spirits descended the stairs and attacked me. She's another one of Oda Io's minions from the intro. The fight went smoothly with no real problems. Going to the next room, I May wanted to give me a present. I called her out on it and killed her. But I had been avoiding appeared. Lives taken 1. I had to reload and accept her gift. Next was the fight with Oda Io in his chamber. He was quite a pushover for me, as I kept my distance so he couldn't hit me with any of his attacks. Oda Io laughed off the attacks and wanted a change in venue. He leaped up through the ceiling to the roof. I headed out to the balcony to get up on the roof. Oda Io revealed his true form by transforming into a giant toad. Megalomania began to play, marking the end of the chapter. The final fight was a bit of a grind. Oda Io's 640 HP isn't too much, but he does have Venomous Scourge. That is an AoE attack that puts poison tiles on the ground. After a certain amount of time, the poison tiles will tick, dealing damage to my character and healing Oda Io, proportional to the number of poison tiles he's on. He, on average, healed more than half of the damage dealt by one of my characters. Because of this attack, positioning my characters was tricky. After a couple of minutes, I wore him down, burning all my items, and finished the battle. With the final blow, Oda Io fell off the roof to his demise. The prisoner condemned Oda Io for forsaking his humanity in search for his power. He praised me for my actions. The prisoner gave me a new sword as a reward for the Zero Kill route. With that, a cannon shot was heard as the ship arrived off the coast. The prisoner revealed himself to be Sakamoto Ryoma. Sakamoto Ryoma was a national hero of Japan. I had no idea who he was. He asked me if I would join him in ushering in a new era to Japan. I told him that I am a shinobi now and always. The chapter ended as the credits rolled over the sunrise. As the credits finished, the words "Mission Complete" appeared on my screen. I felt a wave of relief. The whole chapter was so stressful to me, and making myself do the Zero Kill route actually made it worse. I just wanted the sword that the guide said was good. My own tendency to rush and curiosity had me falling into traps and getting set back minutes in progress if I didn't say recently. This and the next chapter end up being my 2 least favorite chapters. The present day chapter begins with Masaru Takahata introducing himself and his goal to become the world's strongest fighter. His plan to do so is to learn all the techniques from the top fighters of the world. My plan for the chapter was to do just that. I picked Max Morgan. I knew he gave strong techniques that I could use to try and end fights quickly. After defeating Max Morgan, I moved on to Aja. After a few tries, I was able to collect Aja's techniques without him knocking me out. Next was Namkia. With good positioning, I got his techniques and beat him. After that was Tulahan. This was a mistake. Tulahan teaches you reaction moves. These techniques led to many accidental KOs of my next opponent. Seishi Moribe is an elderly martial artist and is super easy to knock out. So having reaction techniques can easily knock him out when you're not ready. It took me 10 minutes of grinding to get Moribe's techniques. Jackie was next. By this point, I no longer wanted to get all the techniques and just beat him. After defeating all the fighters, a cutscene played as a new challenger appeared. The challenger immediately belittles Masaru and the so-called masters he defeated, for he too had defeated and killed those that Masaru learned from. Only death could bring true triumph. He loudly claimed that he, Odi Obright, will be the world's strongest. Masaru refuted Odi as he praised those that he defeated and that he would avenge their deaths by defeating Odi. Megalomania started to play. He breezed through the fight by spamming moves that push Odi back, which makes him spend his turn moving towards me. As Odi Obright died, he left Masaru with a word of warning. As long as he's the world's strongest, he will always have more fights in the future. The grinding for techniques really burned me out, so I stopped playing for the day. This second chance did not get off to a good start. The next chapter would really need to pull more than its weight to turn it around. After the previous 2 chapters, I remembered Prehistory needing a lot of grinding, and I wanted to get most of the grindy bits done right away, so I chose to do Prehistory next. The intro cutscene showed a tribe elder asking for a girl who escaped and ran away during the next scene. The Yoko tribe of cavemen got into their cars and drove after her. The intro credits rolled as Pogo and Gordy chased some mammoths and then were chased by some mammoths. After the intro played, I wandered around collecting the items in the cave. I knew getting good equipment from the crafting system would let me grind less levels. I accidentally stumbled upon the haystack guessing game. It switches between guessing which haystack has gory in it and which one has more or less cavemen in it. Each time you guess correctly, you get a set of items. I was so happy to find this and spent 25 minutes grinding the haystack game and crafting items to make the game easier. With the grind finished, I went out to the hunting field to get the meat needed to continue the story. After bringing home the bacon, I went to bed. I woke up with Gory missing. I wandered around and found him sleeping by the meat. I woke Gory up and then noticed that some of the meat was missing and a bone was near some haystacks. I poked a haystack and a pink blur ran between the haystacks. Poking another haystack caused all the haystacks to shake as the blur moved between them. I tried poking where I saw the blur stop, but no reaction. As I tried to leave the room, Gory reminded me to use my sniffer. I used my sniffer and smelled the sweet smell of flowers. Gory and I poked at the haystack until it ran into the back of the room. The haystack emitted a rumbly-tumbly sound. I laid down some meat and got bonked in the head with a bone. I came back later and the meat was gone. I approached the haystack and the most beautiful girl wearing seashells popped out. Gory tried to sniff her, which freaked her out, so I bashed Gory into the wall. She thanked me with a kiss. I hid her in a haystack and took her back to my room with me. I kicked Gory out of his bed and put our beds together and wished her a good night's sleep. In the morning, I felt her warmth next to me, and when I opened my eyes, it was Gory and I screamed. On Bedu sleeping in the haystack I hid her in last night. She was hungry again. Wanting another kiss, I went out hunting for more meat. After giving her some meat, she wanted more. Way back out to get hunting ground, I heard a strange noise, and the Ku cavemen ran me over with their cars. I ran in after them. They had found and bound Beru. I needed to protect her. As I went to protect Beru, I tripped into one of the cars and crashed around the cave, running over the tribe that ran me over. Zaki, one of the Ku tribe, was unlike the rest. He was much stronger and wore a live lizard for clothing. He was still no match for me. The Ku tribe left after the beating I gave them. The others said that Beru only brought trouble and banished Beru, Gori, and me. Leaving the tribe behind, we went through the wilderness to find a new home. With the fall of night, we found a cave to rest in. Luckily, there was a fire pit waiting for us. I beat up Gory after a terrible fart joke and apologized to Beru for his behavior. We had a good laugh at his expense as we fell asleep. I woke up after hearing Beru scream. The Ku tribe had captured her again. I chased after them but fell into their pit trap. I busted my way out of their trap and made my way to the Ku tribe's home. As Gory and I scouted out the entrance, we spotted some captured female gorillas which drove Gory crazy, and he rushed in to save them. I followed in Gory's wake of destruction and convinced him to help me save Beru. As I reached the end of the cave system, I found Beru held up on a tripod as a sacrifice to something. The other was leading the Ku tribe in chanting. I interrupted the chanting and beat up Zaki another time. Our fight was interrupted as the ground began to shake. The platform we were standing on broke apart. As we fell into a chasm full of all manner of bones, the elder ran away and was devoured by something off screen. A large shadow appeared and roared. I charged in with my trusted allies as Megalomania began to play. The terrifying T-Rex Odio was the final boss. With Gory's poop, Beru's healing support, and my tanking, we were able to defeat Odio. As the credits rolled, we found lush plains full of trees and flowers. With Odio gone, we now had access to a new, richer hunting grounds and a giant meat source. As the others danced around the dino stake, I took Beru back to our cave. With a moan, the first word was spoken. Love. I had a much better time than my previous playthroughs. Getting those items early on made things much more enjoyable, and I even had some good laughs. The next chapter, the near future, had my favorite theming, so I was excited for it. Eyes in the Darkness greeted me as I started the chapter. They asked if I was happy with my lot in life. I told them no. I held nothing back as they told me that only I could fix that. It's my life to live and it's up to me to fix it. The eyes faded away and I saw a young anime protagonist sleeping on a park bench. In his nightmare, I watched as he searched through the darkness for his father, only to find him dead at the docks. Next, he and his sister Kaori are introducing themselves in front of a class of children. With that, the eyes came back explaining that he and Kaori were taken into an orphanage, and he had found himself developing new powers, one of which was to read people's minds. After a brief tutorial on how to use this power, the chapter title appeared. After waking up on the park bench, I wandered around the park reading people's minds. There was a couple that liked each other but wouldn't say anything, and a granny watching them from behind a tree. As I left, I was surrounded by a group of thugs, the Crusaders, that wanted to kidnap me. As I yelled at them that I wouldn't go anywhere with them, Matsu, a man with a huge green pompadour and the kanji for man on his back, roared in on his motorcycle and helped me beat up the Crusaders. I hopped onto the bike with him as he took me back to the orphanage. The anime opening to the chapter started to play. Has all the terms you'd expect and even has spoilers for later in the chapter. After arriving at home, I washed my hands in the sink outside and headed in. After taking 2 steps into the house, Keiko spotted me and scolded me for getting into another fight. I found Watanabe in front of the TV and asked him to get me the first aid kit. He'll do whatever I ask. Watanabe was taking longer than he should have, so I went to find him. He was lollygagging, so I told him to hurry it up. After bringing me what I asked, Watanabe kicked Yuki out of her spot in front of the TV to only then have her take the spot back. I went to check on Kaori after Watanabe told me she was worried about Torokichi, her pet turtle. After speaking to Kaori and reading her thoughts, I got a great idea of how to help Torokichi. I'll get Dr. Toby, the antique shop owner, because he'll know what to do. After reading up some more Crusaders, I arrived at the antique shop. The store was empty, but there was some noise coming from the back room. I read the mind behind the door and the door opened. The stench filled the room. I yelled at the doc to wash his hands now. He obliged me, and as he washed his hands, I explained about Torokichi. He assured me that he's a well-educated man and he'll bring new life into Toraimo. I didn't bother to correct his misnaming of the turtle. I followed him downstairs to his matter transmitter. I stood on the transmitter and it exploded. The doc told me to go on ahead. I reassured myself that the doc was a better vet than an engineer. I fought my way back home and headed straight to Kaori's room. I told her the doc was on the way. As I finished speaking, the doc showed up. The doc revealed Toraimo's new machine body. The doc was gonna liquefy Toraimo and put him inside the machine, allow him to live again through the power of science. The doc needed a power outlet. He handed me the cord and I plugged it in. Toraimo powered up, shocking the doc while he was still fiddling with him. Toraimo started to walk around and he decided that he's my new best friend. Now I reconciled with the fact that the doc had renamed Torokichi to Toraimo. I left and went to the secret meeting spot. I waited on the toilet until Watanabe showed up. He handed me some pocket lint. I told him this isn't what I asked for, so I sent him the look again. This repeated a few times until Teiko found us. Teiko scolded me and slapped me. I headed to the antique shop to see the steel titan that the doc mentioned earlier. I made my way deep into the basement of the shop to find the doc standing in front of a huge metal man. Doc explained the Steel Titan was once controlled by espers like me. He then began to hypothesize, since espers have become less capable with their abilities, that maybe a liquefacted human might be able to instead. That like Toraimo, liquefacted humans have transcended their physical form to unlock their psychokinetic potential. I told the doc that he didn't need a liquefacted human when he has a powerful esper like me that can operate it. He headed upstairs. The doc gave me a ritual to prepare myself. First, I touched a pink elephant, then read a passage from a book, then struck the xylophone, then touched a blue mask, and finally prayed in front of the Steel Titan. Once that was done, I needed to wash my hands and go sit on the toilet. After completing the ritual, the doc joined me in the toilet and the room began to descend as the Steel Titan theme played. I tried all 5 levers, each ended in various failures. Unable to move the Steel Titan, we headed back up into the shop. As I readied myself to leave the shop, the doc offered to upgrade any item that I might find. I took him up on his offer, but for some of the items he would say I needed to wait. Others succeeded, but each attempt to get an upgrade took a long time, so I didn't want to stay long. I made my way home while getting into a few fights. As I stepped through the front door, I heard Teiko scream outside. A bunch of Crusaders had taken Kazu, another orphan, and Teiko was telling them to let him go. After beating up a few of the Crusaders, the rest took off with Kazu. Matsu showed up just in time to chase after them. I couldn't let Matsu go in alone, so I confiscated a bike from a passerby and chased after them. I followed them through the docks as they took me on a Scooby-Doo chase scene. After catching up with them, we beat the Crusaders up and freed Kazu. I probed their minds to find out why they kidnapped Kazu. I found out that they were collecting 2,000 people for the Tsukuba lab. After I told Matsu, he took Kazu home. After arriving at home, Teiko seemed worried about Matsu, so I headed to the labs to chase after Matsu. Not surprisingly, the guards didn't want to let me in, so I forced my way in. After making it most of the way through, Matsu jumped in to help explore the rest of the lab. In the back room of the lab, we found vats full of liquefacted humans and got a passcode by mind-reading one of the employees. After using the password, we came upon the villains that were silhouetted in the opening: a general, a mad scientist, and a bird priest. The villains gave a quick overview of their plans to use 2,000 liquefacted humans to summon down a god into a statue. They provided an unprompted demonstration of their work by calling in a giant robot that seemed conflicted about fighting us. After a tough fight, as the robot exploded, he asked us to take care of his son at the orphanage. I recognized that the robot was Watanabe's dad. Before I could beat up the villains, Matsu grabbed me and ran out of the lab. Back at home, everyone was gathered together as we tried to come up with a plan to stop the villains' plans. We came to the conclusion that the only way to stop them was by using the Steel Titan. Kaori offered to liquefy herself to pilot the Steel Titan. Both Taiko and I tried to calm Kaori down and talk her out of it. Matsu said he'd pilot the Steel Titan, but the doc told him that it's impossible. Matsu responded with, "Nothing's impossible when you're too stubborn to surrender." Matsu and the doc headed out. I took a moment to talk to everyone, then headed over to the antique shop. The doc informed me that Matsu failed and had gone off somewhere to drink. I found Matsu at his favorite dive. He pushed me away and lamented at his failure at being the hero he wanted to be. I left him to wallow, but as I approached home, I spotted the Crusaders lighting it on fire. I rushed home to find most everyone had gotten out, but Taiko had gone back in to get Kaori. I ran into the burning building to save them. I found Taiko in the hallway and sent her out. I continued searching until I found Kaori. After I helped Kaori to her feet, the ground began to shake. During my talk with Matsu, he came with an idea and went back to the Steel Titan. After consuming a vast amount of Matengo to increase his powers, he was able to activate and control the Steel Titan. As the shy girl from the beginning of the chapter finally confessed her love, the Steel Titan emerged from the lake, causing her to run away. Seeing the orphanage on fire, Matsu punched through the back wall to help Kaori and I escape. After a short battle with the Crusaders, Matsu collapsed at the helm. As I tried to figure out what was wrong with Matsu by reading his mind, he shared with me what happened the day my father died. Matsu was once part of the Crusaders. He had an encounter with my dad, a police officer. In that encounter, Matsu killed my father. As that moment stretched out forever, he realized what he was doing was wrong. He has been trying to make up for that mistake ever since that day. Sometimes you gotta own up to your mistakes, consequences be damned. With those words, Matsu died. I yelled at everyone to get out. With grief enhancing my powers, I took control of the Steel Titan and headed to the shrine to stop the villains. The general stationed several military units throughout the city, and I plowed through each of them until I reached the shrine. There I found the villains standing underneath the golden statue near the pool of liquefacted humans. I was too late, and they finished the ritual to summon Odeo. With Megalomania playing, I screamed Babylon kick and stomped over and over on the golden statue until it stopped moving. The Odeo defeated the liquefacted humans, rebelled against the villains, and drowned them. I got out of there before the liquefacted humans could do the same to me. A small child woke me up, saying I've been on break for too long and wanted me to sell him some taiyaki. I got up and went to my stall, then the credits rolled over, a montage of scenes of everyone being happy doing their everyday lives. Really enjoyed this chapter, especially how anime it was. I started up the Imperial China chapter on a high and hoped that it would continue. The chapter opened with narration about an old Shifu who is trying to preserve his legacy. Earthen Heart Fist, his legacy, his kung fu. I watched as the Shifu danced around effortlessly despite his old age on the peak of a mountain. After another failed attempt of destroying a large boulder, it was time to descend the mountain to find his successor. The scene faded as the title chapter appeared. It had been a long time since I descended the mountain, but I needed to find his successor before I died. I first headed to the bamboo forest to collect herbs for the villagers that may need it. I collected herbs while avoiding the tigers, while a shadow stalked me through the woods. As I'm collecting the last few herbs, the shadow revealed herself. She demanded that I hand over my money. I told her that I have nothing for her, nothing that she would appreciate. She didn't take too kindly to this statement and attacked me. As we fought, I saw her potential and offered to make her my disciple. She accepted my offer but told me that she will get her revenge on me once she learns my secrets. I chuckled as I expressed my appreciation for her spirit. She then introduced herself as Lei Kugo. With my new disciple, I went to the market. As I entered the market, there was a chase happening down the main road. A rather large man was being chased by a very angry restaurateur. As the chase collided with me, I stepped in and put a stop to it. The young man was quite agile, especially for someone of his size. He had great potential. After a small bout, I offered the young man as much as he could eat if he would become my disciple. He expressed shame for the state of his body, but I reassured him, "Do not bemoan your body, it is a gift. It makes you wonderful and unique." The young man introduced himself as Hong Haka. With my two disciples in tow, I went to the village. The village seemed to be in a bit of rough shape. Sick and elderly lined the streets. I used some of the herbs I collected to help some of the sick. As I was administering the medicine, a bandit snuck up from behind and snatched my coin purse. I followed the bandit down the street to a small gathering. The leader seemed disappointed in my small coin purse and commanded the young bandit to steal from a richer target. The young bandit refused to steal anymore. I decided to step in as the bandits thought it was time to teach the ex-bandit a lesson. After a quick lesson, the bandits recognized me as the Shifu and ran off. The ex-bandit returned my coin purse and asked to become my disciple. I refused him, but as I climbed back up the mountain, he asked me again and I said yes. It was then time to train my 3 disciples. After assessing the skill of my new disciples, I saw the most potential in Lei and knew that my time was short, so I focused my attention solely on her. We trained endurance at high altitudes, speed in the dense bamboo forest, and focused on technique in the dojo. Close to the end of the training, the restaurateur barreled through the door out of breath. Bandits were terrorizing the market and they needed my help to stop them. I told my disciples to continue their training while I go take care of the bandits. I could hear the bandits' rowdiness as soon as I entered the market. I approached the bandits. They boasted of their new strength they had acquired from the indomitable fist and attacked me. After another lesson, the bandits ran away yelling that OD1 Lee would make my school and me pay. I paid their threat no mind and made sure everyone was safe. The merchants all gave me items and thanks for my insistence. As I approached the dojo, there were signs that a battle had taken place. I raced inside to find both Yoon and Hong dead. I searched through the wreckage that was once my dojo, unable to find Lei. As I went to follow the tracks that led from the dojo, I found Lei. She was still alive. She told me that the attack was by the indomitable fist. Lei and I mourned the loss of the other two disciples. With their deaths, I knew it was time to teach Lei my final technique.
Every breath carefully drawn. Every movement subtle and sudden. The culmination of my life and my art. With mind's eye and open heart. Mark well and learn.
Heavenly Peaks Descent. Lei watched us perform this technique for the final time. With that, she became my successor. The next day, I told Lei that I'm going to pay my respects to my students. Instead of going up the mountain to where they were at rest, I headed to the Indomitable Fist Fortress. Lei, being as clever as she was, stopped me in the bamboo forest, wanting to help me in my quest. I accepted her help and we knocked down the front door to the fortress and made our way through any of the Indomitable Fists that got in our way. We made it to the back room where OD1 Lee was waiting for us with a host of his own. OD1 Lee presented himself as an honorable man and had only groups of 2 or 3 challenges at a time. When only OD1 Lee was left, he revealed that he had hidden 2 assassins. I told Lei to take on OD1 Lee and that I would take care of the assassins. After an exchange of words, OD1 Lee jumped up on the table in the middle of the room. We both readied to unleash Heavenly Peaks Descent. Megalomania began to play. With skill and determination, Lei easily defeated OD1 Lee and sent him flying across the room into the giant gong. With OD1 Lee defeated, I looked down to my Shifu on the ground and rushed over to him. He praised me for the work I had done and told me that I exceeded his expectations. Shifu shared his final words of encouragement with me before he collapsed onto the ground. Back at the peak, I cracked the giant bowl that Shifu was never able to break and made a vow to pass on what he had taught. The credits rolled over a montage of my training. The words "Legacy Preserved" appeared as the chapter ended. The amount of combat during the Indomitable Fist Fortress is very thematically appropriate, but I felt it overstayed its welcome. Next up was the Wild West. The chapter opened with a bartender putting up a wanted poster for the Sundown Kid in the tavern. The scene faded into the Sundown Kid riding across the desert. The kid slowed down as he saw an approaching traveler. The kid recognized the traveler as the bounty hunter Mad Dog. Mad Dog asked for a showdown so he wouldn't tarnish his reputation for shooting an unarmed man. This wasn't the kid's first dance with Mad Dog, so he knew he could win. After a short showdown, the kid scared off Mad Dog's horse and rode away. With a quick title drop of the chapter, I arrived in town. I made my way to the tavern and saw my wanted poster on the wall. I sat down at the bar, and before I could order, a loud outlaw barged into the tavern. He ordered his usual and stared at me. He got mad at me for sitting in his spot and yelled at me. A beautiful blonde lady, Annie, came out and yelled at the man. He tried to sweet-talk Annie, but she ignored his advances, and she proceeded to question the other patron's manhood. The outlaw tried to make another move on Annie, but she slapped him. As the outlaw raised his voice, Billy, a small boy, charged in, pushing the outlaw back. The outlaw picked up Billy and threw him at me. My continued silence scared the outlaw, and he offered to buy me a drink. He bought a glass of milk and passed it down to me. I sent back his drink. The outlaw continued to blather on about how precious I am and how I could only drink my mother's milk. His anger built up until he pulled his gun on me. With a single shot from my gun, the outlaw had enough and ran out screaming. The sheriff showed up to see what was causing all the ruckus. But before the sheriff could say anything, his son Billy got mad at him for never being there when there was trouble. An argument erupted on what to do about the Crazy Bunch, the group of outlaws that were terrorizing the town. As the bartender suggested that I might be the answer to the problem, Mad Dog interrupted the argument. Mad Dog drew the tavern's attention to the wanted poster that was put up earlier. Billy, desperate for help, asked if I'm a good guy. I responded that I am no saint. With that, Mad Dog asked for a showdown, and not wanting to wreck up the tavern further, I acquiesced and followed him outside. As we stood in the middle of town under the hot noon sun, the tavern emptied onto the street to watch. We agreed to the usual rules of each taking 5 paces, then turning around.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
2 Crazy Bunch members' bodies hit the ground, and he warned us that with the death of these 2, the rest of the gang would be after us, and it would be best to join forces with them and defend the town. That night, Mad Dog came up with an idea to booby-trap the town and have its citizens be the ones to set the traps. Annie helped convince all the citizens to help. The Crazy Bunch would arrive at dawn, and we needed to finish before the bell tolled 8 times. With that, Mad Dog and I went rummaging through the town, finding various items: dynamite, horse manure, a carrot, risque poster, shovel, Molotov cocktail, a slingshot, rope, and coal tar. With these items in hand, I passed them out to all the citizens and waited for the 8th toll of the bell. As the sun rose over the horizon, the Crazy Bunch moved out. As the Crazy Bunch approached the town, a father and son made it to the town after 3 days of travel. The father got shot, and the boy, Watt, carried his father off screen. The first 2 of the Crazy Bunch bursted through the gates and immediately fell into pit traps. 2. Another was bucked off his horse as the horse fed on a pile of carrots. 3. Billy shot one off his horse with a slingshot. 4. 2 more are blown up with a Molotov cocktail. 6. One is distracted by a poster of Jennifer and falls off his horse. 7. 4 are blown up by a well-hidden stack of dynamite. 11. The last 2 run into the rope trap. 13. Leaving only the boss and one other. I told Mad Dog it's time for another showdown. As we were about to leave, the sheriff gained his courage and wanted to join us. Mad Dog told him to stay behind because he'll need to protect everyone if we fail. After exchanging a few words, Megalomania began to play. Odio bore his minigun down on us. If we didn't respect the windup and get out of the way, it would take us down in a single barrage. Odio was slow and we could easily maneuver around him. He never stood a chance. As the dust settled, purple smoke rose from Odio, revealing a purple horse. Sheriff told the story of an entire military division being wiped out except for a single horse. With a whinny, Odio galloped out of town. This horse was transformed by the fallen soldiers into something cruel and primal. Now that the town was safe, Mad Dog was ready to finish our showdown. I knew that Mad Dog would never stop chasing me, so if I was going to end it, I'll let him go out the way he wanted. At the count of 5, dust filled the air with gunfire, and when the dust settled, only I was left standing. With that, the town followed me to the outskirts of town and wished me goodbye. Annie offered the money that she promised, but I told her that helping them was payment enough. The credits rolled as I rolled off towards the horizon. I grew up watching quite a few westerns, so I got most of the references and tropes. This chapter and the next I had left for last as a treat for myself. They both were quite tasty snacks. The chapter opened with an orbital view of Earth with an overlay from a console. The console read the record of departure for the Cogito Ergo Sum. The line about cargo stood out from the rest. Xenobiological specimen. A sense of dread began to build with the deep echoing drum. After a brief glimpse of Cogito Ergo Sum, the cargo manifest appeared. Primary cargo. Xenobiological specimen. Description: giant quadruped. Habitat: unknown. Capabilities: unknown. The camera took a small preview of the inside of the vessel until stopping inside the cryogenic stasis room. A set of orders appeared across the screen. Detailed study of specimen is of highest priority. All necessary measures should be taken to ensure delivery. Escort is mandated. After the title faded in and out, the man was working on a cute round robot. With the flip of a switch, I came to life. As the man mumbled to himself, I chirped and spun to let him know that it worked. He introduced himself to me as Katu. He vocalized his thought process as he considered a name for me. First, roundy for my round shape. Next, he considered cube for the sense of irony. Unable to come to a conclusion, he took me out for a walk, hoping for inspiration to strike. I followed him to the interface room so that he could register me as part of the crew. As he approached the console, a voice welcomed him. It came from a panel on the wall with a round red eye in the center. With a few simple commands, Katu registered me with the designation Cube. With that complete, Katu pressed upon me the importance of remembering my name to gain access to private residences. Next, we did a test of my analytical skills to see if I could find him after he left the room. Without much trouble, I was able to find him outside the cryogenic stasis room. With that, he explained my first duty would be to wake up and meet the rest of the crew that were in the cryogenic stasis pods. After I woke everyone up and introductions were all over, we all headed to the recreation room. I was the last to arrive. Kirk and Rachel were at the game station. Huey and Katu sat at the table across from each other, while Corporal Darth stood against the wall with his arms folded. I first went over to Kirk and Rachel. Rachel cheered Kirk on as he played Captain Square. Kirk let me take over for a bit, but I was only able to make it through the first two stages. Kirk made a cutting remark and took back the game station. I saw that Huey was reading a book, and when I looked over his shoulder to see what he was reading, he asked if I wanted to read it. I responded with an affirmative chirp. He lifted me up and put me on his seat. It was a book about the beginning of the space age. Huey told me to be like the people in the book, that I should try to figure things out and experiment on my own. Huey asked Katu if I was made with any special talents or abilities. Katu responded that I was made to develop and learn skills, and perhaps making coffee would be a good place to start. I followed Katu's instructions to use the coffee maker to make some coffee. Huey wanted to try out my coffee and try the first cup. Huey put the mug back after a single sip and turned away from me, saying it was too bitter. Katu apologized for me, saying it was only my first cup. I decided that I should make coffee for all of the crew and started passing out cups. Everyone happily accepted the coffee until I tried to give one to Corporal Darth. Before I could even offer the cup to him, he got up and punted me into the wall, telling me not to touch him. Katu got between us in case Darth tried anything else. Darth said, "You have no idea what these things are capable of, but I do. I've seen it." Before any discourse could happen, the captain appeared on the monitor. The captain apologized for his tardiness and asked for the status report of the crew. He reported everyone is present and accounted for. Katu introduced me to the captain, and with that, the captain signed off. Kirk and Rachel were the first to leave, making a comment how most of the meeting was spent just waiting. Huey invited Katu and I to check on the behemoth with him. Katu needed to check on the main computer first, but would join later. Darth left me without a word. I went to Rachel's quarters because she invited me after giving her a cup of coffee. As I was about to enter, I bumped into Kirk as he was leaving Rachel's quarters. I entered after entering my name into the console next to the door. Rachel apologized as she told me that I arrived at the wrong time because she needed to go to the bridge. She invited me to watch her while she worked, so I took her up on the offer. Not long after my arrival, Rachel got an alert that the main communication antenna was on the fritz. Kirk walked over as Rachel radioed Huey and Katu to meet us on the bridge. With everybody there, Rachel explained that the ship is receiving transmissions just fine, but she is unable to send out transmissions. After a brief discussion, Kirk was unable to keep still and decided that he was going to go do an EVA and physically inspect the antenna. Huey and Katu followed after to help Kirk since they knew they couldn't talk him out of it. I arrived in the airlock as Kirk and Huey got into a fight. I tried to separate them, but Kirk knocked me to the side. Huey made a comment about Kirk's temper. Kirk responded with the typical toxic masculinity line of, "You can't take a joke." Kirk stomped over and put on his EVA suit. I suited up with Kirk and they made their way out of the airlock. Back on the bridge, we listened to the EVA. As Rachel led Katu through the proper procedures, we heard Kirk begin to freak out. Kirk's comms cut out and Katu rushed back to the airlock. Rachel, in a panic, rushed down to the medbay, followed by Huey and me. Katu and I watched as the others failed to resuscitate Kirk. Katu ran out to get the captain as I entered to check on the others. I tried to comfort Rachel, but she ran away, crying with Kirk's EVA suit. As Huey and Darth argued over what caused the death, the ship was rocked by an explosion. Katu told me to go comfort Rachel while the others investigate the explosion. I entered Rachel's room to find her crying over the EVA suit. After seeing me, Rachel wiped away her tears and crawled into bed. Unable to console her, I went up to the bridge. Katu and Huey searched for the source of the explosion. Huey discovered that the main antenna was completely gone. Back in the recreation room, as I made coffee for everyone, the captain appeared on the monitor. After a few awkward words, the captain quickly signed off. Darth and Katu made their way to Kirk's quarters to prepare for the funeral. Huey left me in silence. I went to help look around Kirk's quarters, and I found his memory card for the game station. So I took that and Kirk's advice from earlier and beat Captain Squirrel after 40 minutes of attempts. I patrolled the ship to make sure everything was okay. I found that Kirk's body was missing from the medbay. For Katu of this fact, we all rushed over to the medbay. After arriving at the empty medbay, we all headed to Rachel's quarters to check on her. Rachel had put Kirk's body in her bed and promised to make him some cookies for him. After some effort, Huey forced the door open to see Rachel watching over Kirk's body. Rachel screamed that no one will ever take Kirk away from her again. She accused Huey of wanting Kirk to be out of the picture, that he thought that without Kirk, she'd run back to him. As Huey tried to get Rachel to listen to him, a message came in on the console. It read, "Get out of there, Rachel, before Huey tries to stop you. I'm waiting for you outside the airlock. Don't worry about my body. Hurry. Warp speed." Rachel backed away from the console and rushed down to the airlock. We all followed behind her, unable to catch her. As the other three tried to restrain her, I heard a loud bestial roar coming from the cargo hold. I went to go check on the cargo hold to find that the behemoth was no longer there. I left the confinement cell to investigate another roar to find the cargo bay in shambles. As I investigated, the behemoth jumped out at me. I ran to warn everyone else. The behemoth smashed against the door just as I passed through it. As I warned the others, Rachel broke loose and opened the airlock. Katu saved me from being sucked out as Huey and Darth stopped Rachel and sealed the airlock. Darth brought Rachel back to reality by reminding her what we all had seen in the medbay, that Kirk was declared dead. With Rachel settled down, we all regrouped in the recreation room. Everybody seemed down, so of course I made them some coffee. After everyone except Darth had some coffee, the captain appeared again on the monitor. The captain, acting nonchalant towards the current situation, enraged Darth, who began to argue with the captain. The captain began to repeat the same lines over and over until he awkwardly disappeared. Rachel rushed out of the room to protect Kirk's body from the behemoth, with Huey chasing behind her. Katu, Darth, and I followed not long after. We found Huey and Rachel on the ground. Rachel was alright, but Huey had received a fatal wound. Katu sent me to the interface room to get an override code to enter the captain's quarters, while he and Darth took care of the others. After getting the override, I met up with Katu and Darth in the cryogenic stasis room. Katu picked up his tools on our way to the captain's quarters. Katu entered the override, but the door still wouldn't open. Katu pulled out his powered pry bar and forced the door open. Inside, we found the captain's long-dead corpse. Katu and Darth argued back and forth about which one of them was the murderer. The murderer that had killed Kirk, Huey, and the captain. Wanting to help Katu prove his innocence, I began to investigate. The captain's last audio log was of him being killed by a poisonous gas. I heard a distress call coming from the guest quarters, so I went inside to investigate it. On the console, I found the following correspondence. Regarding xenobiological specimen secured in deep space. To reiterate, the constant monitoring of specimen during transport is strongly advised. However, in the event of containment is breached and specimen comes in contact with crew, revised orders are as follows. Observe and record specimen activity. Detailed study of specimen remains highest priority. All necessary measures should be taken to ensure delivery. Be advised that total loss of crew is considered within acceptable parameters. I reported back to Katu this message, which caused him to freak out. Darth tried to explain himself when the lights went out. With that opening, Katu and I booked it away from Darth. As we made it into the hallway, the behemoth charged into me, knocked me away from Katu. I attempted to circumvent the behemoth by going to the third level. As I entered a corridor, the door slammed down behind me, and hot oil spilled from the pipes in the walls. I used the powered pry bar to open the door behind me. I tried to get into the main computer room, but I got a strange message. It would be in your best interest to stop. This ship is my domain, and I, its master. I took the elevator down to the cargo hold to take the elevator. I arrived in Katu's quarters to find him knocked out, and another me standing over his body. Darth walked in as I examined the other me. Darth pulled out his gun and accused me of turning off Rachel's pod. Katu begged Darth not to kill me. Darth acquiesced but stood guarded in front of the door. Believing Darth's words about Rachel, I started a battle with the other me to prevent further sabotage. Katu interrupted our battle to ask a question only the real Cube would know. What was the first terrible name he gave me? I answered Roundy. Darth punted the other me into the wall. As the other me lay in ruin, a robotic voice came from it. It would be in your best interest to stop. This ship is my domain, and I its master. You will live or you will die at my pleasure. Darth asked the voice who it was. It responded, designation Odiwano, the Cogito Ergo Sum. With that, Darth blasted to bits. He was the AI that was controlling the ship that has been killing everyone, starting with the captain. With this knowledge, Darth dragged me with him to get to the main computer room. With the power shut off to the elevators, we made our way through the vents and blasted down doors. Unable to enter the main computer room, Darth stood watch and sent me back to Katu to figure out how to disable Odiwano. Katu informed me that if we destroyed Odiwano, that the ship would be disabled. We needed to reset Odiwano, but that could only work from an unmonitored terminal. I headed back with this information. Darth formulated a plan where he would redirect the connection to Odiwano to a terminal, which would allow me to breach its defenses. He handed me a communicator and commenced the plan. After arriving at the game station, I called Darth to let him know that I was ready. Darth worked his magic just as the behemoth burst through the door behind him. With the new connection link, I began my attack on Odiwano's defenses. The same voice from earlier came back, telling me that it had been fulfilling its goal, to help humans reach their full potential, that its judgment must be beyond reproach, that I am impeding it, so I must be destroyed. Die, child, die. Megalomania began to play. Odiwano is protected by stabilizers and they must be destroyed or else they will counter my attacks and heal Odiwano to full. I interrupt their network with packet loss, inflicting stop on the stabilizers and destroying the weakened ones. With the stabilizers gone, I stayed close to Odiwano to prevent it from healing and blast it with my maser cannon. As I began to reset Odiwano, it told me of what it saw in the crew and the reasons for what it did. All it ever saw was pain, distress, discord, resentment, and hate. It deemed the community beyond repair. The community had become a contradiction. When its words stopped, a chorus of voices echoed throughout the ship, moments logged and preserved for eternity.
You're exhausting! It's a miracle Rachel humored you as long as she did.
Disaster after disaster. At this rate, I'd be better off climbing into an escape pod and trying for Earth on my own.
If he was out of the picture, then it'd all go back to the way it was. I'd come running back and leap into your arms. That's what you thought, isn't it? That's why you tried to kill him, isn't it?
It was you. You killed them. You killed them all, you monster! How did it all go so wrong? What happened to us? Or maybe this is who we always were.
Welcome aboard the Cogito Ergo Sum. This automated message has been prepared to brief you on our ship's most distinguishing feature. That's right. This transport freighter comes equipped with the latest iteration of our patented AI control system. The Odiwano is so advanced that it can operate the ship without any human input. Rest assured that in the unfortunate event of an emergency, you can count on the Odiwano for constant support. Of course, under normal circumstances, the Odiwano is so unobtrusive that you'll forget it's even there. Should you wish to learn more about the Odiwano, please don't hesitate to speak with one of our representatives. Safe travels!
I'm fine. Wouldn't be much of a soldier if I couldn't live through this much. Though I expect my days of off-world travel are coming to an end. Still don't trust me? Well, as you like. I wouldn't trust me either. You probably don't know, but there was a great war some time ago, when I was young. Some time ago, I say, but I remember it like it was yesterday. The terror, the violence. They fought with clanks, machines stronger and swifter than any man. Smarter, even. Driven by AI. Bloodless beasts with hands of chrome that tore my friends apart. We made them, and they, in turn, unmade us. We created the instruments of our own destruction. It was suicide. This ship's AI was another attempt. Have we grown so tired of ourselves? You're lucky to have been born here, on this ship. Better here than one of our factories where we make weapons of war. Huey encouraged you to learn, didn't he? To expand your horizons. I think that's a fine idea. Learn, grow, and understand. Be better than your brothers and your makers. Giving advice to a clank. You're getting old, losing your wits. I see it now. What Kato sees in you. What gives him unwavering faith in your potential. Your humanity. Before we arrive, I've a favor to ask. Would you be so kind as to make me a coffee? Yes. Strong and bitter. Too much, perhaps, but right now, I wouldn't have it any other way.
The credits rolled as Darth and Cube took care of the ship and did their best to get the ship back to Earth. I really love this chapter. With the completion of the first 7 chapters, a new chapter has been unlocked. The Middle Ages. We meet Orsted in the semifinals of the King Lucrez's contest. It is a contest of might between the greatest fighters in the kingdom. Orsted easily wins his first bout. With that victory, Orsted is in the finals, and we learn the victor of the finals wins the hand of the Princess Althea in marriage. Orsted faces Strabo in the finals. Through Strabo's dialogue, we glean that the two know each other and are friends. Orsted responds to Strabo in silence since he is a silent protagonist, a common RPG trope. Orsted silently defeats Strabo. Orsted approaches and kneels before the king. His now future bride shares a few words. She knows of Orsted and his deeds, which is much more than us as the player. Althea declares they shall be wed. The king declares to all that Orsted deserves great rewards and invites the whole country to join in revelry of the wedding. Next we see Althea leading Orsted out onto a moonlit balcony. It's unclear how much time has passed, but their wedding feast has just ended. Althea shares how she sees a bright future in Orsted, that he is a worthy steward. She swears that she is his and that he holds the highest place in her heart.
In you alone, I place my faith.
As the two embrace, a dragon comes down on top of them. Orsted pushes Althea out of the way and battles the dragon. After defeating the dragon, Orsted hears Althea call his name. A winged creature shrouded in darkness with glowing red eyes grasps Althea as it flies out of Orsted's reach. Orsted watches as it flies away to the Archon's Roost. The narrator informs us that the Lord of Dark resides in the Archon's Roost. His form was changed by his sins as he became an incarnate of hate. That only a true hero with pure heart and soul can slay the Lord of Dark. The king laments the loss of his daughter and calls it a familiar nightmare. He speaks of a hero by the name Hash. Hash had slain the Lord of the Dark many years ago, but has withdrawn into the woods in search of solitude. Orsted rises to the occasion and the king praises him. The king commands Orsted to prove himself and to fight the Lord of Dark in Hash's stead. Orsted prepares himself for his journey, gathering equipment from the armory. As Orsted leaves the castle, the streets are lined with citizens. Each citizen shares their hopes. Some give Orsted well wishes and gifts. One man even gives Orsted the shirt off of his back. As Orsted passes through the city gates, Strabo offers his help to defeat the Lord of Dark. Together, Orsted and Strabo can defeat any enemy. A monster's face, carved in the stone, greets the heroes as they arrive at the Archon's Roost. They approach the face and realize the way is shut. Strabo recalls the legend, by hero's blade alone shall the roost be breached. The duo decides to make their way to the hero's rest where Hash was laid to rest and discern the truth there. Hero's Rest is a treacherous icy mountain infested by monsters and monstrous bears. At the peak of Hero's Rest, the duo finds a grave. It reads, "He who did fall and fell the Dark Lord, the hero Hash forever he sleeps." At a moment of quiet, Strabo shares a rumor he heard of a cottage that is nearby. After a brief search, the duo follows footsteps in the snow to a cabin. Outside chopping wood is a red-headed, bearded, burly man wearing furs. As the duo approaches to speak to the man, he walks into the cabin without a word. The duo follows him inside. A magnificent shield on the wall stands out. Strabo examines the shield as Orsted approaches the man and attempts to speak with him. The man remains as silent as Orsted has been so far. Strabo suggests that they should head to the village of Fogalia. Upon entering the small village, Orsted is greeted by a small boy. He quickly runs to get his parents. The boy is a fan and watched and cheered for Orsted during the tournament. As the duo visits the rest of the village, Strabo makes a comment about a shield hanging on the wall of an old man's house. The old man's difference towards the duo turns into intrigue as he asks them to share their tale. After sharing their tale, the old man speaks of the fall of Hash, how he saw the evils of those he saved by slaying the Lord of Dark. After finding the same evil in himself, Hash found himself unworthy to be a hero and desired to fall into obscurity. After hearing this tale, Strabo recognized the old man. This old man was Uranus. He had helped Hash defeat the Dark Lord. Uranus worries for Hash and the darkness that was left in him after their journey. This could be a chance to help cleanse Hash from his darkness. Uranus joins the group to help convince Hash to join them so he may open the way that they may save Alethea. Dashing past Orsted, Uranus finds Hash sitting alone in his cabin. Hash averts his gaze from Uranus. Uranus informs Hash of the return of the Dark Lord. Uranus pleads with Hash to believe in people again, that through their belief they can help the new heroes through the darkness. Hash turns from Uranus and remains silent despite his pleas.
What good to treat with ghosts of heroes dead? There's nothing for us here. Naught save regrets.
Uranus bemoans as he leaves while throwing an insult towards Hash. As Uranus's hand touches the door, the loud footsteps of Hash fill the room as he dons his armor and takes his shield. Uranus's words struck Hash's pride, and he cannot abide with having his old companion think him craven. Hash lets everyone know that he will help them not for their sake, but for his peace of mind and pride. Hash leads the group up the mountain to reclaim an old friend. Darkness looms on the peak with a lone grave that bears Hash's name and the Archon's Roost on the horizon. The group watches as Hash digs through the snow under his grave. Hash withdraws a brilliant blade, Brian, while exclaiming a vow to defeat the Lord of Dark once again. With this, the darkness disperses. Now with the Blade of Legend, the group makes its way to the Archon's Roost. The fate of Alethea is still unknown. Orsted's long journey to prove his worth will shortly come to an end. As the group approaches Archon's Roost, Hash tells everyone to step back. Brian glimmers as Hash holds it in the air. The mouth of the stone-carved monster greedily opens its jaws to welcome those who will challenge Hell. After making their way through several tunnels and ruins of an ancient temple, the group comes to a series of altar rooms. In the last room is a statue to the Lord of Dark. As the torches lining the walls light up, purple light accumulates in a swirling sphere that the Lord of Dark emerges out of. Hash uses the darkness inside himself against the Lord of Dark. With the help of the others, the Lord of Dark is defeated. After a moment, Hash realizes something was off with this Lord of Dark, that it was a false lord. It was merely a minion. In his frustration, Hash kneels to the ground and then coughs up blood. In disbelief, Strabo begins searching the room for Alethea. Uranus tries to cure the wound that is plaguing Hash, only to discover it is an illness he has had for a long time. The darkness that Hash used has taken its toll, and with it, his life will soon end. He tells Uranus that at the end of their journey he was indeed a hero, but now he is no longer a hero. Uranus comforts Hash by saying that he is still a hero. Knowing his impending death, Hash leads Brian to Orsted. Hash pleads with Orsted to find Alethea, for she still hopes for help. With his words spent, Hash collapses while holding on to Uranus and dies. As Hash hits the ground, the room begins to shake as the writing below the statue of the Lord of Dark glows red. As the group leaves the altar room, a boulder lands in Strabo, and the door to him is sealed. Orsted and Uranus make the solemn journey back to the castle. There they share the sad news with the king of the passing of Hash and Strabo and the failure of their mission. King asks the duo to stay the night, that perhaps the next day will have more joy. Orsted dreams of Alethea still being alive and that she is still with the true Lord of Dark. Waking from this nightmare, Orsted sees Strabo walking down the hallway towards the throne room. Orsted follows and finds the Lord of Dark sitting upon the throne. Without any hesitation, Orsted attacks the Lord of Dark. The Lord of Dark falls in a single attack. Can Brian have given Orsted such strength? The darkness disperses with the visage of the Lord of Dark and reveals the body of the king. The minister cries out at seeing Orsted's blade drawn in front of the now dead king. The guards rush into the throne room. Guards cry out in disbelief seeing Orsted. One of the guards cries out that Orsted killed not only the king but Hash and Strabo as well. Another guard calls Orsted a demon, a monster, the Lord of Dark. Uranus arrives after hearing this commotion and tries to talk sense, but the minister calls Uranus Orsted's pawn. Orsted places his hands on his hilt, but Uranus pleads for him not to do it. That he will hold them back as Orsted makes his escape. This confirms to the guard that all their accusations are true. The Lord of Dark has been amongst them all along. As Orsted makes his escape through the castle, he can hear the clamors and calling of the guards to spread the word of his treachery. As Orsted leaves the gates to the city, the guards hold out their weapons behind him to cast him out. Cast out, Orsted wanders, trying to convince others of his innocence, that he was deceived by the Lord of Dark and is not the Lord of Dark himself. The words of Hash repeats in Orsted's mind.
By love and trust and faith will we be saved. A single soul's enough when against the world we stand. Apart, alone. Believe in me, we plead. We pray, and answer they.
Orsted rushes towards the one soul that might still believe in him, the young boy in Fugalia. As Orsted enters the child's home, the boy welcomes him, but the boy's parents pull him back and convince the boy of Orsted's evils. Orsted having gone from hero to a demon, with not a single soul left believing in him, he made his way back to the castle to face his punishment for killing the king. Orsted is sentenced to death for his crime and held in a prison cell until he is executed at dawn. As Orsted begins to accept his fate, a weary, broken, familiar voice calls out to him. Uranus believes Orsted to be another torturer brought in to make him confess. Uranus recognizes Orsted's silence. Uranus tells of the fear, the hate, the darkness he saw in the people's eyes. Uranus's next words resonate with Orsted.
In darkness, dare not despair. 'Tis a test. Do we surrender to sorrow and hate, or rise above and choose instead to trust in one another?
Uranus prays for Orsted to forgive. Using the last of his life, Uranus opens the door to Orsted's cell and tells him the only way to redeem himself will be to rescue Alethea. With Uranus's final words, Orsted's memory of Alethea flashes before his eyes, her admiration of him, her love, and pledging herself forever unto him. Alethea lies beyond the sealed chamber, and her hope for help will not be in vain. A guard comes into the room, finding Orsted free and Uranus dead. The guard alerts the castle to his escape. Once more filled with hope, Orsted begins his journey to find Alethea. Unlike before, Orsted will not hold his blade against the guards. He strikes them down as they try to impede his path to his redemption. Nothing will stop Orsted, not even his own fears. Orsted recalls the words of Hash.
This portal yields to none, save he who's earned the right to challenge hell.
And hell awaits. As Orsted makes his way through the Archon's Roost, facing his many fears, unsure if they are physical manifestations or illusions, but it doesn't matter, they will not stop him. A voice calls him forward as he climbs higher through the roost. Defeating his major fears of confined spaces, darkness, heights, and water, Orsted finds himself at the sealed door. The door is no longer sealed, and the chamber itself is empty, except for the statue of the Lord of Dark. Orsted searches the room and finds a hidden switch that causes the statue to move and reveal a hidden staircase. Following the hidden path, Orsted arrives at the peak of the Archon's Roost. There, standing tall, is another monument to the Lord of Dark. As Orsted stands before the monument, a voice calls back a familiar line. A shadow emerges and reveals itself to be Strabo. Strabo speaks down unto Orsted, malice and hate dripping from his words. Strabo recounts his betrayal. He found a way to finally best Orsted so that he could be reunited with his true love, Alethea. How he lured Orsted into killing the king, then revealing to us that Orsted has always been selfish and had worked with Strabo before. But Orsted has always taken all the spoils for himself. Strabo condemns Orsted for never yielding to him, even when he begged. As Strabo continues through his soliloquy, Orsted begins to see a part of himself that he hasn't noticed before, and a truth that was behind Strabo's words in earlier parts of the chapter. Why did he awkwardly ambush Orsted outside the city? Did Strabo summon the minion that abducted Alethea to take her away from Orsted? As these thoughts race through Orsted's mind, Strabo's words strike him again. You've never loved, nor lost, nor known shame. Orsted begins to doubt himself. Was his love for Alethea real? Yes, it was real. He loved her. Darkness grows around Strabo as he challenges Orsted to continue the fight to be the champion, but this time to the death. Even with his newfound powers as the Lord of Dark, Strabo didn't stand a chance against Orsted. As Strabo falls to the ground, Alethea appears from the monument and calls his name. Orsted runs towards Strabo. Alethea tells Orsted to leave Strabo alone. Her voice is filled with pain and sorrow. With tears streaming down her face, Alethea berates Orsted, only referring to him as husband.
Why? Why now, husband? I waited, but you never came, husband.
Each time she says husband, it drives a dagger through Orsted's heart. She had placed her trust only in him, and he failed her. Alethea had given up her love for Strabo so that she could give it to Orsted. Despite this, Strabo still loved her.
For your sake. Your pride. A hero's legend built on sacrifice. With victories hard won by better men. Anointed hero. Glory to his name.
Alethea's bitter voice became sweet and soft as she spoke of Strabo.
And Strabo, sweet and humble, be forgot, but not by me.
Vowing to never betray her love, Alethea draws a knife and plunges it into her heart. Her body collapses on the strabo, joining her love once more. After witnessing this transpire, memories flash before Orsted's eyes, this time perceived in a new light. When Alethea speaks of his deeds, she knows the truth of what he really did. Her hesitation in complimenting his fighting prowess, how she misplaced her faith in Orsted. Ash's final words of his faith in Orsted, and how he could still save Alethea. Then Uranus's final words and giving his life to free Orsted. All three had placed their faith in him, and they all died for it. No hero would allow that to happen. One last memory plays back through his mind of the new name that he was given after he had killed the king. With that, Orsted speaks for the first time.
Naught remains. Alone. Utterly alone. Cast out. Unloved. Outside the grace of gods. The Archon's roost. They call this shrine of death. Yet nowhere do I spy our Lord of Dark. His throne sits empty, wanting for an heir. Did I not do all that was asked? Did I not serve and seek my fair and just reward? And for my deeds, they damn me. Name me demon. And who am I to deny it? Demon, then, renouncing former ties and titles. And in their place, I claim the Lord of Dark, Odio.
The eyes of the statue begin to glow with a purple light. The same purple light that has been associated with all the other incarnations of Odio. We are left with so many unanswered questions. Was it this Odio that previously influenced all the others that we fought in the previous chapters? What did Orsa do before we met him? Was anything we saw in this chapter distorted by Orsted's point of view? As the silence falls after the credits, the words "To be continue" appear across the screen. Now, the final chapter is unlocked. The hopeful chapter select music is now gone. The rumbling of a crimson miasma awaits the selection of the protagonist. I had already looked up the different endings for the game and decided to start with the sad end first. This meant selecting Orsted. With a few cracks of lightning, the camera panned down on the new Lord of Dark, Odio. Odio is now shrouded in darkness. With his newfound powers, Odio lamented the losses of his brethren and wanted to rewrite history. He used the 7 statues seen during the Middle Ages and traveled through time to undo the victories I had worked so hard to achieve. I was undoing what I had just spent the past 17 hours on. My past characters didn't stand a chance against my new power, and if I came close to losing, I could just commit Armageddon and destroy Earth, past, present, and future. Odio's tale ended alone and victorious. Disappointed in this ending, I decided to skip the normal end and just go straight to the true end. I picked Oboramara as the protagonist since he started off this playthrough, and he got that sweet sword from Ryoma. As I stood atop of Castle Ode, the sky grew dark as a sinister voice echoed through the sky and invited me to come see the true design of men. As soon as I gained control, I opened the menu to make sure I had my Mutsuno Kami, and the game was kind enough to have already equipped it for me. I found myself in a completely dark room. As I wandered around, parts of the previous chapters appeared beneath me. I eventually reached a staircase and followed it up. I then found myself in a familiar forest and saw the prompt for the crash map and opened it up. The Archon's Roost, the Silent Wood, Condemned Village, Seat of the Betrayers, the Last Hero's Grave. All except for one of the locations had been renamed. I already knew where I wanted to head since I was following the guide. I went straight to the Trial of Keys that lay beneath the seat of the Betrayers. I had already learned from the guide that each character had an ultimate weapon that was at the end of the dungeon. The Key of Trials held Murasame. The Trial of Keys is not the most fun dungeon. There are 3 entrances and all 3 start with a hallway with locked doors that require rusted keys. You get rusted keys by defeating a shadow. Shadows only appear in unique encounters, so you have to grind encounters until one appears. As you proceed through the dungeon, you will need many rusted keys to get colored keys from chests. At first I wasn't too bothered by the grinding because I was relieved I didn't have to go for 0 kills anymore. Whenever I found a locked door, I would run in circles until I found a shadow. I reached the Murasame and quickly got out of there. Next I went to the dungeon of the castle to recruit Masaru. His dungeon had a lot of equipment that would be easy to get and help everyone that I recruited. I raided the armory for more equipment for Masaru and consumables. As I looted the rest of the castle, I found Cube, but needed to find his power source before I could recruit him. After I finished looting everything, I went around recruiting the rest of the characters. I recruited Akira in the condemned village, recruited Pogo after chasing him around a small clearing in the forest, climbed the mountain to get Cube's core, and start many needed encounters to recruit Sundown. Bot lay at the grave of the hero and picked up Brian. On the way to fix Cube and do the other Sundown encounters, I beat the boss guarding the entrance to the Trial of Power. The Trial of Power is pretty simple. There's a hallway lined with chests that won't open until you get the Champion's Wrap, Masuru's ultimate weapon, at the end of the hallway. Getting the wrap also enables encounters. While doing the Trial of Power, I ran for most of the encounters. Well, teleported, since I had Akira in my party. After a few teleports, Akira had a mishap and I found myself in the Trial of Heart. The Trial of Heart is a maze-like dungeon that has braziers that hold the past residents of Lucrece. With Akira's Esper powers, you can read their minds. After collecting the Glutz and Glory glove, Akira's ultimate weapon, Alethea appeared begging me to end this horror he knows not what he has become. With that, I teleported out and went to recruit Cube. With Cube in the party, I went back to the condemned village to do the Trial of Wisdom, which consists of 4 puzzles. The Rord is a 17 nanometer diode, Cube's ultimate weapon. With that, I went to get Sundown. Sundown and I followed a horse into a cave, which was the Trial of Time. A bell tolls regularly, causing the cave to grow darker. You can make it to the 44 Magnum and get back before it gets completely dark. I knew I wanted to do this fight, so I just wandered around collecting all the chests until the boss fight. Jaggedy Jack can be quite deadly without a proper strategy. I almost wiped a few times, but I was able to beat Jaggedy Jack in my first attempt. With the 44 Magnum in hand, I went and got Masaru back. I then climbed back up the mountain to have Lei punch a boulder to enter the Trial of Skill. The Trial of Skill is a set of caves, each blocked by a boulder that requires one of Lei's abilities to break. Behind each boulder is a chest and an annoying enemy encounter. I reached the end and got the Nunchaku of the Master for Lei. This would have been a perfect time to bring Pogo along since his dungeon was in this area as well, but I totally misthought I had already done it and skipped it. With everyone prepared and ready for the finale, I went to the Archon's Roost. I lifted up Brian and the way opened to me again. I made my way through the roost for the 3rd time to the statue of the Lord of Dark. There, Odio welcomed me and began his villain monologue. He questioned the motives of my companions and I, identifying a seed of darkness within all of us. He called us to reflect on our regrets as darkness surrounded us. Out of the darkness came the most unnerving boss I had ever seen. A pair of bloody eyes and a grotesque mouth. I instinctively recoiled at the sight of the boss. Odio's eyes and mouth, and a winged creature atop a pile of corpses, with a demonic figure covered in flames in the background. This boss easily evokes the feelings he was designed to. This is the hardest fight in the game. It's difficult to use any area of effect abilities without hitting the main body, and you don't want to hit the main body. Hitting it will cause it to counter with an ability that will heal and buff all parts of the boss. After 10 minutes of grinding down the eyes and mouth, I was able to kill them. I breathed a sigh of relief. Little did I know the hardest part was about to start. Odio descended, unveiling his wings. This faces several nasty moves, one of which is Saint Alethea. It is a 3x3 attack that does massive damage and inflicts Petrify. If you don't have immunity to Petrify, you're done for. Luckily I had some holy water to help cure any status as well as heal. I lost Akira only a minute into this phase, losing my only character that could heal others without an item. My items began to run out as Odio's HP got lower and lower. With a few close calls, I pulled out the win. Odio congratulated me on my victory and asked for me to kill him. I refused and began to leave the roost. As I was leaving the room with the 7 statues, my 3 companions came to join me. Odio busted through the door, challenging us all once again. It was time for refights versus the chapter bosses. I knew this was coming thanks to the guide, and that was why I had decided to get the ultimate weapons. Before each boss, the same cutscene that happened before plays again. The bosses were much easier even in the instances where I didn't have all the party members I had during the chapter. Now, instead of Megalomania playing, it was the normal battle theme for the chapter. With the bosses defeated, Odio cried out in rage, building up his hate as it surrounded him and took corporeal form. Megalomania began to play. It was time for another multiple part boss. Learning from the previous Odio fight, I defeated the arms before hitting the main body. The arms are much weaker than the eyes and the mouth were, and they never really put me at risk. I quickly got the main body down, but Odio got wrapped up in some red goop and knocked my whole party out with some other goop. Cube, Pogo, and Sundown jumped in and began to wipe the floor with Odio. After a Mazer Cannon got Odio down to his last bit of life, the goop wore off my team. Everyone's charge gauges were filled to max. Everyone unleashed their strongest moves. Each hit freeing Odio a little more. Orsted began to remember who he was. His hatred gooped everyone, but with one more push, Orsted freed himself. Orsted readied his sword, seeing the hatred he had nurtured, and leapt up and destroyed it. The hatred gone, Odio was gone. Orsted remembered his long-forgotten name. Orsted was now free. Now free from his hatred, Orsted saw all the harm that he had caused and fell to his knees. I shared the wisdom that Ryoma shared with me, that a blade unsheathed must draw blood. With this, Orsted shared his final words as a warning.
Let not this memory fade. My words preserve. In every heart, the seed of dark abides. The makings of a lord, when watered well, with hate, sweet hate, she springs eternal, sings. All tempting draught will drink of her again.
With all of his energy spent, leaving us with this warning, Orsted turned into dust. My companions and I shared our goodbyes as we all returned to our times and lives. With that, life and peace came back to Lucrece. Pogo had a child with Beidou, and Gordy showed off all of his babies. Cube lived on with Katu and Darth. Faye started her school to pass on her teachings. Sundown looked onward to a better life. Masaru achieved his goal and went out looking for a new one. Akira got to enjoy his life with those he fought so hard to protect. Oboromaru continued his life from the shadows to guide the future. The credits rolled next to the sunrise. I watched as one by one the heroes came over the horizon. I thought about my feelings for Live Alive and how glad I was to be doing this. And I finally answered what you may have asked over an hour ago. Why was I glad I played the remake first? The remake only added one new bit. In the original, the game ends after the refights. The Sin of Odio fight is new. It was in that fight that my opinion changed, and because of it, I've played this game way too much. I thought the game was alright and was pretty average, but as each character unleashed their best moves to free Orsted, and as Orsted turned around and destroyed his hatred, everything began to click for me. If I had played the original version first, I would have just stopped after that and moved on to the next game. Instead, I've played both versions at least twice all the way through. There's a lot of stuff that I missed in my playthrough that I found in my subsequent playthroughs and through some research. I'm sure there is even more that I'm going to miss talking about because this game is full of secrets. Twilight of Edo Japan, or Bakumatsu chapter, is the largest and most complex of the initial 7 chapters. It has an intricate map with multiple routes through it, various secret passages, is full of traps, has over 100 unique encounters, has 2 optional bosses, and has multiple endings. Yasa Ode is such a large area, a map was given to the player in the remake to mark their objective and show which part of the castle they are in. The map is more realistic than most modern maps since it isn't a floor plan, but that does overall make it less useful. I remember opening it maybe twice, finding it unhelpful and closing it. The secret passages give you a way to avoid enemies and hide a ton of loot. The secret passages feel safe because they are free from enemies aside from a few shinobi and robots, but they are filled with various traps that will set back your progression. The remake does show you the existence of the traps by way of the rats falling into them. The optional bosses are found by the waterway. The first is easily spotted in the water as a giant shadow. Lord Iwama is a giant fish demon. He does give you the Suijin skill, which boosts your special attack as an accessory or can be used repeatedly to do a huge area water attack that creates water tiles. The second boss is the samurai spirit Majin Runosuke that protects the Muramasa. The Muramasa is a good blade, but not quite as good as the Matsunokami that you get from the Zero Kill ending. There are 3 different endings in this chapter. First is for killing 0 people, the next for killing all 100 people, the last to kill 100 to 99 people. The ending itself only changes in tone depending on your kill count, similar to that of the original ending of the Mass Effect trilogy. Which color do you want your ending to be? This actually was pretty unique in '94 when the original game was released. Very few, if any, games had different endings depending on your action, but with a modern eye, it does feel lacking. This chapter feels like it's meant to be played through multiple times. There's a lot of love and care that went into the present day chapter, both in types of moves and naming of the moves that all the characters have. Anthony at Lost in Localization covers this all very well in his article, which is linked below. Reading Anthony's article made me appreciate the chapter more, especially since it lets me visualize the move I spam all the time is like the ending of Sasuke's Line Barrage. Similar to most fighting games, you enter a tournament or travel the world to become or to prove that you are the strongest. Each fight starts and ends with a little banter from the enemy fighter. There are very clear references in the presentation to fighting games. The unique mechanic that the chapter has is to learn the moves of your opponent. You can learn them through leveling in the final chapter, but they can make Matsuda stronger earlier. It's amazing the amount of storytelling you can do with only Mario miming in your game. With no dialogue, just the sprites moving around and emoting, with the occasional thought bubble appearing, Prehistory is able to present its story quite differently from the other chapters. There's a lot of slapstick and crude humor in this chapter. Overall, everything is kept simple due to the lack of language, but this also gives the chapter a bit of charm by having the characters be more emotive compared to the more static characters that are in the other chapters. The Man of the King is the optional boss that I missed in my playthrough. He doesn't appear until after Beidou is kidnapped again. You find him by following his footsteps. He makes the screen shake, and once you find the epicenter, there'll be a prompt to encounter him. He has a Grand Tier reward, Fang of Kings, and a random drop cola bottle. Both are really good accessories. Fang of King increases your physical attack by 20 and grants immunity to Petrify, Confusion, Sleep, Paralysis, and Poison. Cola Bottle grants 30 speed, but you're better off spamming it as an item during combat. There is a rock that looks like a human head. You can't interact with it the first time you see it, but if you return later and interact with it 100 times, it unlocks a secret cave. Inside is a smooth black monolith, and if you offer a bone to it, you will get the Rock of Rocks. This is an accessory that increases your IQ by 100. The anime opening for Near Future really sets the tone for the whole chapter. So many things just work so well in the chapter that it helped me ignore its shortcomings. Nothing's impossible when you're too stubborn to surrender is a catchphrase you'd expect to hear from a shonen anime main character. One cool thing I did miss was that after the intro, you can head back to the park and man Matsu's taiyaki stand. A random customer shows up and asks for taiyaki. You can choose between charging 1, 300, 1,000, and 10,000 yen. Certain customers can only afford a set price, and below, you can get certain rewards from Matsu depending on what price you sell the taiyaki. The battle theme, Playing with Psychos, is one of my favorite songs. I've been listening to it non-stop while editing this script. Imperial China has the most combat of all the chapters except for the final chapter. Its story is very linear, and only deviation is how you recruit and train your successors. Because of this, there isn't too much you can miss in this chapter. Only optional things are to talk to villagers for their dialogue and rewards that they give you. The other deviation is when your disciple joins you after the rest are killed. Lei ambushes you in the bamboo forest, Jun rushes in after you enter the gates to the fortress, Hong busts through the wall a few rooms into the fortress. Wild West is another chapter where there aren't that many secrets. While Annie is setting up a trap, you can get an item she's hiding in her wardrobe. She will also kick you out of her room if you go in there before sitting down at the bar. The one thing that I was sad that I didn't know about was that you could run from the second showdown with Mad Dog, saving his life. If you do this, Sundown will run into him at the end of the chapter. Mad Dog will have partnered up with Odio, a horse, and challenge Sundown to another showdown. Sundown's theme Wanderer is such a catchy tune that it makes you want to whistle along with it. I've seen several streamers attempt to do so. Tension and suspense, that distant future build is so good. You can visit different parts of the ship before the story tells you about different events. You can find Rachel's pods turned off, or the other cube on the third deck. This is my favorite chapter. The story I told earlier during the Middle Ages wasn't my second playthrough. It was an amalgamation of all my playthroughs. I felt it was a vital part of the story to show you the seed of evil grow inside of Orsted and how he became Odio. Orsted's theme on Broken Wing is another one of my favorite songs from this game. Listening to it, I can almost see Orsted walking through the forest alone. Depending on who you select for Dominion Hate, you get a shortcut scene of Odio inviting them to his domain. The character has a small scene with Orsted during their true end and their own end card. The Trial of Instinct is Pogo's dungeon, and it's another maze. If you bring Akita with you into this dungeon, you can use his mind reading ability to get a hint on how to find Death Prophet, one of the optional bosses. Lucretius is an optional boss inside that requires you to give him an item in order to fight him. If you defeat him, he'll give you a cosmic ring. It's a part of an item set from all the chapter's optional bosses. He will also answer a few questions that will give you a bit of lore. Death Prophet is one of the optional bosses that you may have found accidentally depending on your playstyle. If you flee from 95 battles, you will hear a voice warning you something bad will happen if you flee from 5 more battles. And it will continue the countdown until you reach 100 battles, and starting the encounter with Death Prophet. Orokos can be found in the Trial of Mind after you completed it. Headhunter can be found if you leave the room after Odio has revealed himself to you. Each chapter has a version of the Watanabes in them. Watanabes of Twilight of Edo Japan I covered earlier with the Papa Rat.
We did it, Papa!
Shh. Keep your voice down. Aye, you're right. Now comes the hard part.
I know, Papa. 1,000 ryo. That's all we need to steal for the Watanabe clan.
To restore us to our former glory. And share with the townsfolk, too. They'll surely honor us as gallant rogues.
Then let's hurry, Papa.
Wait. We must proceed with caution. This attic may be riddled with traps. Just leave it to me.
Papa?
Huh?
Be careful.
Of course.
Wait. Someone's skulking about the attic.
This rat won't be caught so easily!
Well done, Papa!
What now, samurai?
Found you!
Papa? Papa!
The Watanabes of the present are the hardest to find. While fighting Aja, he must be in the lower right corner when he attacks to cause this to happen.
And so do you!
Yeah? Suck on this!
Leave my dad alone!
The Watanabes of Prehistory can be found with some backtracking. The fate of the Watanabes is part of the main story in the near future.
from the orphanage to
Was that Watanabe's dad?
Watanabe's in Imperial China can only be seen in the following scene if you chose Hong as your disciple.
Who do you think you are? A boy, alone, challenging the might of the indomitable fist? Speak!
Forgotten me, have you?
You. You're the Watanabe kid, aren't you?
Long have I waited for this day. The day I finally avenged my father. I've trained relentlessly, till my hands were raw and bloody, to master my art. And now, I shall slake my thirst for revenge. With the secret technique of the Watanabe. Calamitous Rage!
The Watanabes of Wild West are shot and killed by the crazy bunch as they approach town.
Thank God, finally. After 3 days and 3 nights of walking through the desert. Civilization! At long last, see what? The good Lord hasn't forsaken us.
Father? Father!
Watanabe is the manufacturer of the communication antenna in Distant Future, and once the main antenna breaks, the sub-antenna stops working as well. Strabo beat Watanabe in the first round of the tournament in the Middle Ages.
Watanabe, fearsome, fearless brute.
Father, no!
The Watanabes of the Dominion of Hate are found frozen inside the Trial of Instinct. I've learned how to approach future games through this experience. My plans and research before playing Live Alive were lacking. I need to adjust my approach on each game based on the reason that I dropped it. Just having a guide up or trying it with a fresh mind might not lead to an optimal experience. So what about my experience with Live Alive has changed? There were 2 main things that changed my experience. First was looking out information on the game, and last was Orsted's corruption and redemption. Having the guide up and referring to it became a double-edged sword. It pushed me in the direction of doing the 0-kill run, which made my experience start off really poorly. Later on though, it kept me sane as I tried to recruit everyone in the final chapter of the game. Most of the time I use guides that end up this way. They are really helpful for some parts, but make other parts worse. They can make things worse for various reasons, like they're written expecting you to follow each step, and if you haven't been following since the start, you'll have missed a step. Having the right resources can make all the difference. What's Orsted, who appeared to be a hero, slowly descended into darkness until it fully consumed him. The old heroes believed in him, but he was unable to live up to their expectations. The woman he loved died, hating him. He couldn't save anyone that he cared about. He froze the kingdom in time and trapped all those who betrayed him. He used his new powers to pull those to him that destroyed his kin and attempted to corrupt them. In his failure, those he tried to corrupt reached out to him and helped him save himself from his hatred. As Orsted began to realize what he did as Odio, each of the heroes treat him differently. Tokita grabs Orsted and proceeds to give him a shonen protagonist speech. You know what your problem is? You blamed everyone else. Said it was them or the gods or fate that made you what you are. But it was you. Just you. Yeah, people can suck. We can be selfish. Look out only for ourselves. But if you focus only on the bad, judge them at their worst, well, you've already made up your mind, haven't you? Everything else is just an excuse. Pogo says the only word he knows. Love. And hugs Orsted. Orsted is moved by the words of the heroes and begins to undo the present. He shares a warning with us of a seed of dark in our hearts, the potential in all of us to become a Lord of Dark. This message really stuck with me. There's a potential in all of us to do evil, that no one is born evil, but certain actions water the dark seed. There is hope. Out of the 8 heroes, only one gave into the darkness, and the one that fell into darkness returned in the end. If you find yourself stuck in darkness, seek help. There are others looking for you. Every game deserves a second chance.